Pakistan's foreign minister traveled to Bangladesh on Saturday. Now, he becomes then the most senior Pakistani official to visit Dhaka since 2012, the two having been bitter enemies, really, since their split in 1971. But as the Muslim-majority nations seek to rebuild ties, they are now expected to sign several different bilateral agreements this weekend as neighboring India watches on closely. Well, France 24's international affairs editor Leela Jacinto joins me on set now for a closer look. Hi, Leela. So it's not the Pakistani prime minister that's visiting, but it's the foreign minister. So is this visit really all that significant?
It is very significant. It's overlooked, but it is very significant. I mean, these two countries have very deep, painful histories. And you really have to look at a map to understand, the historic context that these two countries share. Bangladesh was part of Pakistan until 1971. It was called East Pakistan. And the 1970 war was brutal. The war crimes committed by the Pakistani military, there were extensive war crimes. Tens of thousands of women were raped. The death toll estimates ranged from 300,000 to 3 million. And Bangladesh got its independence in 1971 with help from India. So Bangladesh has always been, the traditional Asian chessboard has been, Bangladesh has very close ties with India. And this was particularly so under the rule of former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted last year in a popular uprising. So when Sheikh Hasina was in power for 15 years, the ties between India and Bangladesh were extremely tight. But since her ouster last year, Pakistan and Bangladesh, these historic, these countries with painful histories, have drawn closer together. So earlier this year, for the very first time in their histories, the two countries had direct trade exchanges. And even more significant, our military cooperation that's now happening between Bangladesh and Pakistan. There have been high-level military meetings, and the Bangladeshi Navy has participated in military exercises off the Pakistani coast. Of course, this is being watched very, very closely by India, which, as you see, straddles the two countries. It's the giant between the two countries.
So, I mean, how has India then reacted to the deepening Pakistan-Bangladesh ties over time?
Well, India is very concerned. I mean, officially, India states that, India does not support Sheikh Hasina, the ousted leader's political party, the Awami League, which is now outlawed. But, Sheikh Hasina flew into exile in India, and she continues to stay there. She skips all her court proceedings. Now, earlier, and India is also very alarmed, of course, because Pakistan is India's arch enemy. If you remember, just earlier this year, in May, India and Pakistan had its latest rounds of military clashes. And in those military clashes in May, Pakistan deployed Chinese weapons on the battlefield very effectively. Because the traditional Indian, the chessboard in Asia has been China backs Pakistan against India. Because India also has, regional border issues with China. They have fought wars. They've had border skirmishes in 2020. And India, particularly under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been drawing closer and closer to the U.S. Under President Trump's first presidency, Modi and Trump had a bromance of sorts. The U.S. and the Western calculation has been that India is a counterweight to an asserting China in the Indo-Pacific. And, this is very important for France, too, who has, geographic interests in the Indo-Pacific region. So, the set pieces were India was the democratic counterweight to China, and so it was part of the Western alliance. But in his second presidency, Trump is overturning this apple cart because he has slapped India with an astonishing 50% tariffs, 50% tariffs, and is punishing India for its imports of Russian oil. Now, China is really using this to draw India closer in. And President Xi Jinping calls it the dragon-elephant tango, the dragon being China and the elephant being India, of course. So Chinese statements have been very strong. They've opposed U.S. bullying of India on these tariffs. And New Delhi is realizing that it is not in its strategic interest to alienate China. And so what we are seeing right now is the changing pieces in the chessboard. This is being overlooked in Washington and in Western capitals. This is not the priority right now. But should the Indo-Pacific region change, should China start asserting itself, especially in Taiwan, what the West will realize is that the regional landscape is changed. And India shares a 2,500 kilometer border with China and will probably not be willing to really trust the West and the US as a dependable ally. So watch this space.
Indeed, more